Okay, so some of the assignments, good morning. Some of the assignments, the critical review number 1 is due on Tuesday before 9:15 that morning. Make sure you take a few minutes to review it. And again, it's been posted for quite a while, so you should be able to get ahead of it when you do it. There is a lot of information in there, and the main challenge that we talked about was what worked well in Australia, what worked well in Australia that might not work here. And if you look through the article, there's all kinds of stuff in there. So don't try to answer everything. Kind of pick out a couple things that really worked well in Australia, and then evaluate those things as to whether you think they would work here in the United States or not. Okay? So again, there's just too much to cover, but if you just focus on 2 issues, that'll give you, or 3, we know, just limit the number you do, don't try to do it all, and that'll help focus the paper that you're coming up due. Finish reading chapter 6 and begin review for the exam, which will be next Tuesday, and again, it will be online, and I will be in the class for those of you that need to have better internet access or want to do it by paper. Anybody going to do it paper this time rather than online? Yeah. It's online, and so I created it to be done online, but if you need to do it paper, I'll have to reformat it and get your paper copy. Do it online? Okay, so I'll just put it all online. And so when you look for the assignment, then there will be 2 different assignments. One will take over for the multiple choice and the fill in the blank. That'll be done online. And the second one will be the short answer and essay question. Just email those to me like you did this last time. And you have the entire class period from 9:15 to 10:30. Yes, sir.
So for this past one, is the first exam grade the actual first exam, or is it the one that we took?
Well, that was the first exam. It was the one that we took.
There's 2 grades for it. That's why I'm asking. Wait.
Do not pay attention to the first one that was there,
Okay.
because that people did it online, on paper, and a combination of online and on paper. And I went bonkers trying to figure out how to grade it. So I created a second assignment, which is this first exam, and that's got the grades. Does that help? So, as is my practice, we had a 5-point adjustment to make sure we had at least one person got an A. So final, there was 1 A, 1 B+, 4 Bs, 3 Cs, and 1 D+. So when you get your papers back, for those of you that did it online, Andrew's not with us today. Tristan is here, and Charlotte is here, and Mason. Miss Mason is here. So what you'll see is 2 grades, and the one you're concerned about is the one on the bottom that's in the circle. That's what your actual final grade is. It was just much too confusing to try to sort it out, and I just said to heck with it. To go on from there. Overall, was pleased. Everybody has challenges trying to do the fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I hate fill in the blanks.
So just to go through them real quickly, emergency management is based on the concept of continuous improvement. Always learning and processing through. First recorded emergency manager was NOAA. Okay. Key events that cause citizens and decision-making awareness of potential policy failure are known as focusing events. We had 3 categories of crisis response: tactical, operational, strategic. Any one of those would work. There were 3. Yes, ma'am. Pardon me? See me after class, yeah. We'll make an adjustment. And then name 3 weaknesses of relying on historical data: anecdotal, incomplete, or not recorded. So again, look over those as you go through. Forced a re-examination of traditional medical practice was the Black Plague. Gaining an understanding of what actually happened as opposed to unsubstantiated stories, and we talked specifically about Hurricane Katrina, and that was this idea of disaster mythology. Established a precedent that government had the authority, was a Freedmen's Bureau, set up after the Civil War and became kind of a big disaster. Research based primarily on personal interviews, textual analysis, anecdotal information is often referred to as qualitative as opposed to quantitative, which is number. Early social science research organizations was NORC, National Opinion Research Center. Pliny the Elder described the historical event, which was the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Primary components of the traditional model of comprehensive management were all the above: mitigation, recovery, preparedness, response. Federal legislation that authorized national response to emergencies was the Stafford Act. Guiding principles that support were engaged partnerships, readiness to act, tiered response, unity of effort, so it was all of the above. And key agency with oversight was FEMA. Overall on the essays, I was pleased. The one challenge that kind of tripped me out was the fact that some of you didn't answer 3 of the short essay questions. Some of you only answered 2 of them. Huh? Which made a difference, because that would have missed 10 points, which would have made all the difference in the world. So again, you know, it's 3 of the 5 you need to answer, and then 1 of the 2 essays. So make sure you, and like I say, if you didn't number them or put the question down, I may have missed it. So if you did answer 3 and didn't get credit for 3, let me know. We'll look back over it and go from there. Oh, I forgot to give you yours back. I'm sorry. Yeah, so ready to go from there. Okay, tour of Newberry County Emergency Operations Center will start at 9 a.m. on October 12th. That's a Tuesday after we come back from break. We'll be sending out an excuse from class for that morning to be able to go through, because it should last an hour and a half or so. So by the time we get down to the location and get back. So it'll start at 9 a.m. Make sure you wear your masks. And I will have more specifics on that on Thursday. And we have a presentation coming up on tentatively the 21st of October by the city administrator of Newberry and the fire chief. And then again, the presentation I'm supposed to have today had to be canceled, and so we'll set that up again when I get some dates from him to go forward. Okay, a class project. We talked about this early on and indicated that we would get directions toward the middle of the semester, so here we go. You will develop and present an emergency preparedness plan. This will consist of a 10-page report as well as a 10-minute class presentation. If you want to use PowerPoint, you can. However, there is no requirement that you use PowerPoint for your presentation. Okay, it will not add or detract one way or the other from the presentation. Some people just find it more convenient to do that. Use our class discussion and information provided in the text to guide your plan. And that's what the previous chapter was all about, was developing it. Also, by getting a tour of the Emergency Preparedness Center next Tuesday will help, and we'll talk about some of those things that go forward. So make sure we go from there. You choose a jurisdiction and whether it will be a general strategic plan or a specific tactical plan. And I was pleased that most, if not everybody, got that distinction between tactical and strategic. That's an important key for what we're doing. So you can choose a jurisdiction, whether you want it to be a city, a county, a state, the nation, whatever the jurisdiction is you want to be, and then follow those guidelines that are in, again, Chapter 5 specifically about what you need to have. And I've got a couple other things that you may want to come up from risk management, because if those of you who started reading Chapter 6, your author suggests, you know, that risk management is kind of the foundation of emergency management, emergency preparedness. So those tools will help out as well. I gave everybody an opportunity to tell me what groups they wanted to work in, and I got no response, so here are the teams.
Oh, I thought we got to pick.
Well, nobody told me they wanted, so
I thought we were doing that today in class, or the other day in class.
You don't like your person?
No.
Huh?
I don't even know who my person is.
Well, they're not here today.
Oh.
Okay, Andrew's not here today. Charlotte and Owen work pretty good. Aiden and Tristan will be a match. Caitlin and Reese.
Is that the
Reese is the guy that sits over
Oh,
here.
I don't even know who that is.
Okay. And Danelle, you're the holdover because we had a person drop. Now, I can add you to another team, or what would be very interesting, you don't have to do this, but you spent the summer working on a private sector plan. You've got a lot of that stuff already in place. If you want to work on yourself, you don't have to do that. I can put you on a team. But if it's possible for you to use that private sector plan, that would be a great balance.
Yeah, I'll bid on that.
Okay. Yeah, not just because you spent the summer doing it and you've got all the background information and stuff. And I just thought, as we've talked several times, that will be a great foil for the way the public sector does it. So if that works, we're ready to go. Okay, and for those of you who will be watching it, Mr. Corwin gets to do his own. He's doing it remotely, and so he will work on his own and go from there. Now, I think I've got these names right. Charlotte, Owen, Aiden, and Caden were the ones that are going to do the radio program? Yep? Okay. That will be done on October 18th, Monday the 18th. And the four of you will get an excuse from class that morning to participate. You will also earn extra credit points for jumping in. Each prepare about a 4-minute, because, I mean, Caitlin, you did it before, so I mean, you don't really have all that much time.
Yeah, you know.
But, about 4 minutes, and if you get to do the 4, that's fine. And we can discuss an issue related to emergency management. It could be a specific event or personal preparedness. You can, have the, for hurricanes, who to look to, that kind of stuff. Yes, sir.
Before you send this, can you fix my name? It's AIDAN and it's Listener Man.
Oh, okay. I'll make sure to make that change.
I don't want them to put my name on the thing and it'd be completely wrong.
Oh, no, because I take the names right off the roll because I send those along, but I'll make that correction. Thank you. Okay, and review. Remember, Chapter 4 talked about the evolving role of emergency management and the manager. A lot of good material on there for test. Chapter 5 is creating an emergency management plan should be your go-to guide as you start putting together your own and kind of look at those. Rules will be slightly different. The broad principles are the same, but the big issue you have is you don't have to deal with politics. The boss says do it, and the folks say yes, sir, kind of thing. So we'll go on from there. Let's see. I've got a couple of resources we're going to see at the end of class today. Quote of the day, as we like to have, it is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts. And that was from Sherlock Holmes, quoted in your text. What that means is we've talked several times in a variety of settings that we are kind of self-organizing systems. We look for patterns and routines, right? And so an example of that is you've seen the exercise of connecting the 9 dots and trying to use the least number of lines. The other one that I like to use is a couple decides they wanted to have a rose garden. And in that rose garden, they wanted to have 6 rows with 4 roses in each row. Right? The problem is they could only afford to buy 12 roses. Is it possible to have a rose garden with 6 rows, 4 roses in each row, but only have the ability to get half the number of roses that you need? Yeah? How would you do it?
Cut the rows in half.
How do you mean cut them in half?
Seeds in the roses.
Hmm?
Don't they have roses have seeds?
No seeds. All you've got is that number of plants. You've got only enough to have 6 rows of 4, which is 6 times 4 would be 24 roses to do it in one way, but you only can afford to buy 12.
Make your garden smaller.
This involves the are going to use S rows, or SE rows, I just don't know how.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a straightforward, but see, one of the problems is we look at when we talk about the word row, okay, what do we think of?
A boat.
Row a boat, okay, but in a
Oh,
garden,
oh, like rows and things, actually, yeah.
yeah. But in the terms of in the field or planting a garden or agriculture, how do we normally look at rows? Straight lines and tend to be parallel, right? Nowhere does it say it has to be that, but that's what our perception is. So the response to the question is really quite simple. Okay. So you have 6 rows, you have 4 rows in each, 4 roses in each row, right? But our perception, it's like the example of bringing in a stool sample next third Tuesday.
Oh, we're still bringing our stool samples in?
Yeah. That perception, right? And that's what all this is saying. Sometimes our preconceived notions, our prejudices, our biases prevent us from really getting all the information we need. We get fixated on a response, and then we factor everything around to fit what we think the answer is. And sometimes that works just fine, but not always. And that's what this point is about. And that's what risk assessment does. Get the data, get the facts, get the information, and then move forward from there. Key point. What's another way to translate the expression key point? You'll have an opportunity to demonstrate you understand this key point. There is a direct link between risk management and emergency management plan. Your test suggests that risk management is the foundation of emergency management. Okay. That's why it's important to look at risk management as we move forward. Risk management contains 3 basic benefits, advantages, whichever term you want to use between risk management and the emergency management plan. First is a realistic appraisal of potential community risks. And realistic is the important part. Right? Don't be swayed by the politics. Don't be swayed by what happened last time. What's a realistic assessment of what can take place in the community, the risks? It allows you to create scenarios on response strategies, right? Based on, again, realistic assumptions. And as we do several times, there's a unique way to take the words, letters in the word assume, and give them a completely different meaning. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
It's going better.
Getting better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So that's not Reese.
No,
Which one is it?
that's Andrew. Reese is the guy that sits over here. Trying to grade the exam was a pain because it was done 3 different ways. So when you look for your exam, you mentioned this, look for the first exam grade, not the first assignment that was put up there. And you'll see there was a factor of 5 extra points, which your final grade will be the one that's circled at the bottom to go from there. Okay. So again, this idea that it's a realistic appraisal of potential risks. It allows you to create scenarios, which you talked about the idea of practicing and exercising. Those scenarios would come away, but they have to be realistic assumptions. And we all know what happens when we take assume and change the letters a little bit. If you don't know, ask somebody shaking their head, because otherwise I get in trouble for that. And the better you do risk management, it then forms a basis for the justification for resources needed for emergency planning. And whether those resources are money or personnel or equipment, the better your risk management, your risk assessment of what's potentially out there, practice through your scenarios, the stronger case you have to argue for the funding to make it happen. So this whole idea of risk assessment and risk management are critically important. The components, and again, your text goes at great length about this, are what's the impact of an event? What's the probability of the event happening? And what are your community's vulnerabilities? And keep in mind, what's the difference between an impact and a vulnerability?
Vulnerability, just like, it's like what you can't really protect all too much.
Yeah.
Impact is just what happens.
Yeah, impact is what happens. Vulnerabilities, yeah, we can't really deal with all of those things. So understanding those are very key. And again, your book goes at a nice discussion of those three elements, which get to be important as we move forward. So this idea of impact, probability, and vulnerability. And then the ideas that are important in discussing risk is first, it's a future concept. And one of the toughest things in life is getting people fired up about something they don't want to have happen in the first place. Get them to take the time and energy and effort to be prepared when they don't want it to happen, which is exactly why we see runs on grocery stores and hardware stores and looking for generators and all those kind of things when there's an impending disaster, because people just don't think about it until it's on top of them. And that's why this whole notion of emergency management is so critical. Somebody has to do the thinking for the community. It's relative. When we talked about that before, when we talked about this notion of assessing the emergencies. And what were some of the reasons why we said that that was relative, and why would risk be relative?
You mean you can't really come up with an exact on risk?
A little bit more fundamental than that, eh?
It's relative to what happens, like what impact the disaster has.
Impact more than what happened, and why impact?
Because impact is what we're trying to stop.
No, I mean, the one great difference is power loss is relative. In the city of New Orleans, they got their power back relatively quickly. The rural areas, it's taken a lot longer to get their power back. So usually larger jurisdictions that have more money, more resources, are able to respond and recover much more quickly than more rural areas that may not have any kind of disaster preparedness and have limited resources to make things happen. So this idea is relative. A power outage in Newberry affects lots of folks, but it can be usually done pretty quickly, right? In my area, a power outage can take hours to get straightened out because I'm a rural area. And if it's widespread, I'm the last person it gets talked to, which is why I have not one but two generators in my house. Okay? So it's relative based on the population, the geography, all those issues that get involved we talked about before. You should focus on those vulnerabilities, both objective and subjective. And what's the difference between objective and subjective?
I guess it's one that does matter and one that matters.
Kind of, sort of.
Is one more broader than the other one?
Pardon me?
Is one more broader than the other?
Kind of, sort of. Objective as a general rule means there's some criteria for evaluation. Subjective, it's more like it's an opinion. It's a belief. So when we ask what's the best restaurant in Newberry, is that an objective question or a subjective question? Very subjective, because everybody's opinion is different, right? Some like Italian, some like just tapas style of food, some are like Mexican, all that gets involved, right? So you've not only taken, this goes back to that early quote, it's not only those things everybody thinks about all the time and we start having our solutions going, but there are also those things that, yeah, that's a real risk of just because we haven't had it. Doesn't mean we shouldn't deal with it. We should be prepared to deal with it. Does that help in that understanding? We'll talk more about that on Thursday. But again, this is just to kind of set some of the terminology that happens. Questions on this part? Okay, I have several videos that we're going to watch that talk about risk assessment. They will be posted tonight as resources or linkages in Wolf Den. And there is material on these things that is very good test material. So as you watch them in class today, and as you re-watch them, I would look for key points that you move forward on them. And again, they'll be posted this evening. So we'll stop the